So I'll be going over the amino acids and how I memorize them for the MCAT using a couple mnemonics. So we know amino acids are molecules which are the building blocks of all proteins. They consist of an amino group, a hydrogen atom, a carboxylic acid group, and an R group, which is a distinguishing factor that determines the function of the protein. All four groups are attached to a central tetrahedral carbon atom, which we call our alpha carbon. As I said, the R group determines the function of the amino acid, and we can separate the 20 amino acids into 4 separate groups based on the properties of their R group. And this would be acidic, basic, polar, and nonpolar. In order for this to be helpful, you must have already memorized the 3-letter abbreviation for each amino acid as well as its 1-letter abbreviation. Anki is really helpful for this. There are also apps that I have used. I just look up amino acid apps, and if you're just on your phone, some downtime, you can just go ahead, spend a few minutes, and make sure you have them memorized. Also, for simplicity's sake, I only drew out the R group, but just keep in mind that that R group is coming from that carbon. That's what it's attached to, the alpha carbon of the amino acid. For the acidic amino acids, I like to use the acronym D. I say D acids, literally like the acids, because they are acidic. And also, the acidic amino acids also are negatively charged. And I remember this by associating acidic with, for example, toxic, and then I associate that with the word negative. And it's a stretch, but it helps, and that's how I remember. So the letter D will represent aspartic acid, and the letter E will represent glutamic acid, and it's just something that I remember, D acids, and that also helps remembering, their properties, that they're acidic and that it's negatively charged by that association that I made. And then to remember the structures, I like to think E comes after D, so E has one more methyl, and that's the only difference is glutamic acid has one extra methyl group before its carboxylic acid group. I memorized the basic amino acids by the acronym HKR, which I like to say as hiker. So basic amino acids are positively charged. So I like to say hikers are basic, but positive people. Kidding, of course, but this helps. This is engraved in my brain. Hikers are basic but positive people. Just remember it's the word hiker with no vowels. H stands for histidine, K stands for lysine, and R stands for arginine. And these are your 3 basic amino acids, and they're also positively charged. Some things to note that are important for the MCAT. The group highlighted on histidine, that is the imidazole group, and then the group highlighted in arginine, that is the guanidinium group. This is important to know. I've gotten questions like this on the MCAT, so this is just something you have to memorize. I also included their side chain pKa's. For histidine, it's 6.5, lysine is 10, arginine is 12, which makes sense, right, if they're basic. And lysine and arginine are cationic, so they are protonated at physiological pH. At 7.4 physiological pH, histidine, though, can either be protonated or deprotonated, which makes it a readily available proton acceptor/donor, which is why it's prevalent at protein active sites. For the polar amino acids, I use the acronym CYST space NQ. So I think of cyst, not cute, because of the Q, makes the Q sound. And then I imagine a cyst full of water, and water equals polar. It's a stretch, but again, it works. Whatever, you can do to get it to stick in your head. So C representing cytosine, Y representing tyrosine, S representing serine, T representing threonine, N representing asparagine, and Q representing glutamine. Again, that's why it's essential to have these 1-letter abbreviations memorized. Since these amino acids are polar, it makes sense that the N groups of the R chain are either hydroxyl group or amide groups. For asparagine and glutamine, their structures are very similar, so I use the same thing I did with the acidic amino acids. Q comes after N, so Q has one extra methyl before its amide at the end. And for the others, these are a little easier to remember because they have things, that the others don't. Like cysteine will have that sulfhydryl group, and tyrosine will have that aromatic ring with the hydroxyl. So these, you can just remember them with Anki or that amino acid app that I mentioned. So for the nonpolar amino acids, this one's a bit of a stretch, but I use the acronym awful, NVP is how I say it, and then I put plus glycine because that one's it just has a hydrogen atom as its R group, so I kind of just try to remember that one on its own. But awful, MVP, I like to think they're awful, they are nothing, so they are nonpolar and they are not charged. I find that awful MVP is an easy term to remember. Just remember it's not a U, it's an I. After you write this down so many times, these acronyms kind of just stick. So I know they're a stretch, but they were really helpful. So again, they are nothing, they are not polar, and they are not charged. Glycine is just the one you have to remember, but again, its R group is just a hydrogen atom, so just remember to single that one out. So A will stand for alanine, W tryptophan, F phenylalanine, I isoleucine, L leucine, M is methionine, B is valine, and P is proline. So tryptophan has that highlighted R group because that is the indole group, which is important to memorize for the MCAT. Other than that, again, I just use Anki and that app to memorize the structures. Proline is that funky one. It's a heterocyclic amino acid, so that R group attaches back to its primary amino group. I hope this was helpful. Again, I know it's a stretch, but it really helped me. Every time I sat down to study, I wrote these over and over again, and then eventually it just stuck. For the MCAT even, as soon as I sat down, I wrote this on my whiteboard, sheet that they give you, and again, it was just really helpful. So yeah, thank you for listening.